Tom Brady thought his Pro Bowl comments about Shedeur Sanders would stay private, but they didn't. The moment those words leaked, Shedeur went on live TV and responded in a way nobody expected. What he said next left the entire NFL world completely silent.
I went down and celebrated in the end zone with my teammates every time. I wanted everyone to feel like they were part of the success. I told the linemen, we're all running to the end zone and we're celebrating as a team. Because I think that's way more intimidating than a quarterback doing his 6-shooter guns and pointing up in the crowd and doing all that other bullshit that's very self-promotional, but it's not about winning. And I think winning in football is about a team.
Okay, so Tom Brady might have just revealed why the Raiders passed on Shedeur Sanders and let him slide all the way to the 5th round of the NFL draft. Brady said flat out, he does not like the BS self-promoting celebrations that quarterbacks do after they score a touchdown. Then he pointed out that when he played, he always celebrated with his offensive linemen and made sure everybody got in on the celebration.
Shedeur Sanders just shut Tom Brady down on live television, and the clip is already breaking the internet. Brady made comments about Shedeur at the Pro Bowl that he thought would stay behind closed doors. He was wrong, because the moment those comments leaked, Shedeur Sanders did something nobody expected. He responded, publicly, directly, with zero hesitation, and what he said has the entire NFL world picking sides right now. You clicked on this for a reason. Stay right here, because this story goes way deeper than the headline.
That worked hard, they put the team first, they were committed to one another, they were committed to try to do the right thing on every play, they showed up every day with a good attitude to be successful, they weren't selfish. You had receivers that were going to go in and crack safeties. You had running backs that were going to step up in pass protection and take on blitzing linebackers. You were going to have a quarterback that could stand in the pocket and take a hit when someone's bearing down on their face mask. You had defensive linemen that were taking up 2 offensive linemen so a linebacker could scrape over the top.
You already know what time it is. When those Brady comments dropped, the timeline went absolutely nuclear. We're talking about trend number 1 across every sports platform simultaneously. Group chats blowing up, radio hosts cutting their segments short to address it, former players weighing in from their couches, because this was not just some throwaway comment from a random analyst or a retired role player looking for attention. This was Tom Brady. 7 rings, the most decorated quarterback in the history of professional football, a man whose opinion carries so much weight in this league that when he speaks, front offices actually listen, coaches actually adjust. The whole ecosystem of NFL conversation shifts when Brady opens his mouth about football, and everybody knows it. So when word started leaking out of that Pro Bowl event about what Brady had said regarding Shedeur Sanders, people did not brush it off. They could not, because the source was too credible, the comments were too specific, and the timing was too deliberate for anyone to pretend it was nothing. Let me walk you through exactly what happened. The Pro Bowl weekend had been going smoothly up until this point. Players were relaxed, the media access was open, Brady was doing what Brady always does at these events, holding court, commanding the room, saying all the right things with that easy confidence that comes from 20-plus years of being the most important person in every building he walks into. Cameras were on him, reporters were hanging on every word. And then somebody asked about young quarterbacks, about the next generation, about who in this current draft class or young player pool had the tools to be special at the NFL level. Brady smiled, took a breath, and then he said something about Shedeur Sanders that stopped the room. Hold on, because here is where it gets real. According to people who were in that room, Brady's comments were not a simple critique. They were not the kind of measured, diplomatic feedback that veterans usually dish out when cameras are rolling, and they know the clip is going everywhere. These comments were pointed, they were specific, and the way Brady delivered them, casually, almost dismissively, made them land even harder than if he had come out swinging directly. The gist of what Brady said, according to multiple people present, was that Shedeur Sanders still had things to prove at the NFL level, that the jump from college, even elite college football, to the professional game was something you could not fully prepare for until you were in it. that he had watched Shedeur on film, and while the talent was obvious, there were questions about how that talent would translate when the speed of the game increased and the margin for error disappeared entirely.
At Shedeur, is that why the Raiders didn't take Shedeur?
Well, the Raiders had a few opportunities to draft him, did they not? Even after the first round? I don't know if it's a shot at Shedeur. I know one thing, Jason. It certainly wasn't an endorsement.
It's to me, it's a direct shot, and it blows up. And this is where I give Dion and his marketers and all this. They had this picture paint.
Now, on the surface, taken completely out of context, that might sound like reasonable football analysis, the kind of thing a 7-time champion might say about almost any young quarterback. But here is what the cameras did not show. Here is what the clip that circulated did not include. Earlier that same weekend, Shedeur Sanders had been at the same event. He had been in rooms adjacent to Brady. He had been warm, professional, respectful, by every account from everyone who witnessed their interactions. There was no beef, there was no tension, there was nothing that would indicate Brady had a legitimate football concern driving those comments. Which is exactly why, when the quotes leaked, people immediately started asking, why now? Why this specific player? Why frame it that way? And Shedeur Sanders, apparently, was asking the same questions. But here's where it flips, and this is the part that made the whole internet stop scrolling. Because most players in Shedeur's position would have let it go, would have deferred to Brady's legacy, would have given some carefully worded response through a publicist about respecting all feedback and staying focused on their own journey. That is the safe play. That is what the NFL machine conditions young players to do when someone bigger than them takes a shot. Shedeur Sanders did not do the safe thing. He went live. Not a tweet, not a statement through a rep, not a carefully edited Instagram post. He went on live television, sat down, looked directly into the camera, and addressed Tom Brady's comments word by word, calm, measured, absolutely unbothered. And what he said was one of the most quietly devastating responses in recent sports media memory. He did not attack Brady, he did not disrespect the legacy, he acknowledged everything Brady had accomplished, genuinely, without sarcasm, and then he said something that made every commentator, every analyst, every former player watching lose their composure. He said he had watched Brady's film too, all of it. Early career, the years before the rings, the struggles, the moments where Brady himself had things to prove and people in that same league who questioned whether his talent would translate. And he said with that same easy smile, looking directly into the camera, that he respected that journey because he was on his own version of it right now, and he was not interested in shrinking to make anyone more comfortable with his presence. The room went silent.
Aren't always willing to do. And I would prefer to be on a team full of champions over stars. And even in this broadcasting role, Chris, that's what I look for all the time. When a quarterback throws a touchdown pass, I actually watch to see who he goes and celebrates with. Because what did I do? I looked for my offensive lineman every time. I went down and celebrated in the end zone with my teammates every time. I wanted everyone to feel like they were part of the success. I told the lineman, we're all running to the end zone and we're celebrating as a team. Because I think that's way more intimidating.
The host tried to move to the next question. Nobody was ready to move to the next question. Wait, it gets even better, because within 20 minutes of that clip hitting the internet, the responses started pouring in, and they were not coming from just fans. Former quarterbacks were texting each other about it. Analysts who had been neutral on Shedeur Sanders for 2 years were suddenly very loud with opinions. One prominent former Super Bowl champion posted a single word on social media in response to the clip, and that word was respect. Brady's camp went quiet. No response, no follow-up clarification, no "what I meant was," just silence. And in the NFL media world, silence from Tom Brady after a moment like that is its own kind of answer. Because here's the truth about what just happened, and this is the layer underneath the layer that most of the coverage is completely missing. Tom Brady is now in a position of influence inside the NFL ecosystem that goes beyond playing. He has relationships with ownership groups. He has credibility with league offices. When Brady speaks about a young player, positively or negatively, it moves things. It shapes narratives. It can open doors or quietly close them before a player even knows what happened. That is the game Shedeur Sanders just walked into, and he walked into it with his eyes completely open. By responding the way he did, publicly, confidently, without aggression, but without apology, Shedeur did something that very few players at his stage of career have the composure to pull off. He forced the conversation to be about substance, about film, about preparation, about the actual football. He took Brady's comments, which were designed, intentionally or not, to put a ceiling on the perception of Shedeur's potential, and he refused to accept that ceiling. Live, on television, in front of everyone, and the NFL world is still processing it. Here's what this moment actually means for Shedeur Sanders going forward. There is a version of this story where a young quarterback stays quiet, absorbs the criticism, and lets Brady's comments define the narrative heading into the next phase of his career. That version of the story has happened before. It has happened to talented players who did not understand that in this league, perception is infrastructure, that what the powerful people say about you when you were coming up can shape your trajectory in ways that have nothing to do with what you do on the field.
So, Tom Brady, here we go. Tom Brady said, I watch every throw, every run, every time he stood back up after getting hit hard. Nobody understands the weight of carrying a whole team on your shoulders until they have done it themselves. Shedeur Sanders fighting for an entire city. Nobody has the right to mock someone who continues to battle the...
Shedeur Sanders understands that. His response was not emotional, it was strategic. It was the move of someone who has been paying attention, not just to football, but to the business of football, to how the game is played off the field as much as on it. And that level of awareness at this stage of his career is genuinely rare. Because the players who last in this league, the ones who build real legacies, not just careers, they understand that you have to control your own narrative. You cannot outsource that to coaches or agents or the media. You have to be willing to stand in front of a camera and say, with complete clarity, exactly who you are and exactly what you are about. That is what Shedeur Sanders did today, and nobody who watched it will forget it. The question now is what Brady does next. Whether this becomes a genuine back and forth, or whether the GOAT decides that engaging further only amplifies the story in Shedeur's favor. Based on how that live response landed, most people in the industry already know the answer to that question. Shedeur Sanders came into this weekend as a young quarterback with a promising future, and a lot of people still sitting on the fence about him. He is leaving it as someone who just went toe-to-toe in the court of public opinion with the most legendary player in NFL history and walked away standing taller. That is not nothing. That is a moment, and moments like this have a way of defining careers. So here's where we land. Tom Brady made comments he probably assumed would fade into the weekend noise. Shedeur Sanders made sure they did not, and then made sure his response was the thing people remembered instead. One move, perfectly executed on live television. The real question is this: is the NFL establishment genuinely uncomfortable with the idea of Shedeur Sanders writing his own story on his own terms without asking anyone's permission? Because based on what we just watched, that is exactly what is happening, and there is not a single thing anyone can do to stop it. Drop your thoughts below. Is Shedeur Sanders built different, or is this just the beginning of a bigger war? And if you want the real story before anyone else has it, you already know what to do. Hit subscribe and stay locked in.